All right. If you remember, my friend, we're talking, the Rebbe here is explaining in this speech that he gave in 1991, Tazria Matzora, when the two Torah portions were joined like they are this year, that there seems to be some sort of a weird message over here that's being given to us by these two Torah portions, because each one is the opposite of the other, and each one contains contradictions within itself. What does it mean? Tazria Matzora, right? We read two Torah portions this year. Some years they're separated. Last year they were separated. This year they're joined. The first one is Tazria, which means when a woman gives seed. And the second one, and that sort of represents the future redemption. And the next one is talking about Matzora, which means leprosy. We explained yesterday, it's not really leprosy, it's a spiritual impurity. It's not leprosy. The person doesn't feel, as far as I know, doesn't feel sick. Maybe he feels heavy or something, but he doesn't feel sick, or his limbs fall off, or that his flesh rots. It's just a certain small discoloration on his skin. Right? It's a small sort of discoloration. And there's many, many details about how it is. There has to be a hair in the middle of it, and etc. But this shows a certain, it's an indication that this person is impure, and he can't go into the holy temple. In fact, he can't even come into the congregation. He has to sit separately from everybody, right outside of the camp, it says. So that's Mitzora. So the Rebbe said that seems a little bit weird. I mean, the first one is talking about Tazria. That means a woman gives birth. That's like the future redemption. And the second, after, it's followed by Matzoro, which means to be sick. That's the exile. So what do you mean the redemption is followed by the exile? That's not nice. It's not true either. I mean, the future redemption is going to be total. The whole world will feel, how do you say, elevated, happy, fortunate. Everyone will feel fortunate they're being created. That's the redemption. That's giving birth. And why is it followed by Matzora, which means to be sick, to be impure? Doesn't make sense. Says the Rebbe, not only that, in each one of these two Torah portions, there's also a self-contradiction. The first one, Tazria, talks about giving birth, the redemption. Immediately after that, in that same Torah portion itself, it has all of the laws of impurity. The second Torah portion, which begins on a terrible note, and it's called by its name, it's called Matzora, impurity. So that's followed by all the laws of how the Matzora becomes pure. So that also seems to be like sort of self-contradicting. The first Torah portion we read begins great. It talks about the redemption. Immediately it's followed by sickness. And the second Torah portion that we read this week begins with sickness, but the whole thing is talking about getting healthy. So it's all seemingly mixed up. It doesn't make any sense. How should it be, right? If I would write the Torah, it would be different. There wouldn't be these questions. It would be like this. There also wouldn't be the meaning in it also, but at least there wouldn't be the question. Should it be? The first Torah portion should be Mitzora. It talks about, the name of it is getting sick. And it should have all the laws of impurity. And then after that, it would be followed by Tazria, the woman gives birth. And that would be followed by all the laws of purification. Huh? That's how it should be, right? But that's not the way it is. It begins with Tazria, the redemption, and in that Torah portion talks about the disease. And the second Torah portion starts with the disease, and then it talks about the purification. So the whole thing is all a big jumble, doesn't make any sense. Says the Rebbe, take it easy. God knows what he's doing. There's a very, very essential message over here, a very deep message. And like we say, you cannot take the Torah only at face value. You can take the Torah at face value. There's what's called pshat, but you can't take it only at face value. There's something much, much deeper, much more personal and urgent and dynamic and vital in the Torah that the Torah is trying to teach us. The word Torah means teaching. Torah means teaching, hora'ah. So it's teaching about all these opposites and why it starts good and then talks about bad, and then it goes to bad again, and then talks about good. Why? What's going on? So we say, here we go. Yesh lahakdim, Yuvan Bahaktim, we can understand this by preceding. One second, let's see if I can do this over here. By preceding an explanation in exactly what are the Nagaim. What is this Tzoraat, this, I want to call it spiritual leprosy? I just have to keep saying it over and over again. I'm calling it leprosy because, for lack of a better word, but it's not leprosy. It's not a physical disease. You can't cure it. There's no cure for this. It cures itself. It just, you have to just lock the person away or separate them from everybody, and then it goes away on its own. You can't like treat it with injections or salves or something like that. Balm. It doesn't come from a germ or from a virus or from a, Allah pasuk on the sentence that says Adam ki ba'or basaro. It's explained in Lakuti Torah. That's in the first Torah portion we have. Adam is Madrega Gedola. How does the Torah's portion start off? After it talks about a woman when she gives birth to a male, so this is what she does. A certain number of days he's impure, and this, and then afterwards it says an Adam, a person, when he has in his flesh a discoloration. So when it talks about man, it says Adam. There's a lot of words for man in Hebrew. One of them is Ish. Another one is Enosh. Another one is Gever. And another one is Adam. Adam represents the highest of all of them. Almost like in English, to a certain degree, when you say the word man, what does it imply? Now they're trying to wreck the whole thing up, but what does the word man mean? Man can either mean man as opposed to a woman, or it could be a man means as opposed to a coward. He's a real man. He's manly. Or it can be man as opposed to an animal, right? Man as opposed to an animal. But act like a man, don't act like a human. Act like a human being. Act like a man. Don't act like a mankind, right? Don't be an animal. They're trying to break that down also, but man. Okay, so the word man, that's pretty loose, but it's still sort of relevant. It sort of corresponds. Adam, it says a man. The word man, Adam, Adam, this is the highest, is a very high level. Like when man was created, where did the word Adam came from? From the first man. The first man was created. This is the prototype, ideal example of what man is. Man, Adam is, that's like, so to speak, perfection. This is the perfection of everything. Adam, hazeh ki mukhsharin masav, when a person, his deeds are proper and everything that he does is the way it's supposed to be, is yochal liot adayan be'or basaro atachtona Adam, even though he's perfect, but still says Adam, a man, when there is a discoloration in his skin and he has this impurity, Adam, even a person that's an Adam and he's totally pure and everything is okay, but nevertheless there can still be a discoloration, an impurity. How? It could be that maybe somehow or other in his lowest aspects he did not refine the bad and the, how do you say, the the unnecessary things inside of him. And there is a little sign of impurity. And these are the impurities. There's this thing called coaching. Now it's very big in the world, coaching. But ideally, what was a coach? Like people who are acting. They wanted to be professional actors, or they want to be professional boxers, or want to be a professional pianist, or whatever. So they get a teacher or a coach. What is the teacher or the coach? The teacher or the coach points out little imperfections or mistakes that they're making that they would never know on their own. And it could be that the person is an excellent, musician, or an excellent boxer, or an excellent, whatever, on his own. But he has a little tiny imperfection but he would never know it. So he has to get a coach to come and point this out to him. Says the Rebbe, that's the same thing also by a person that is striving for true perfection. And people generally strive for perfection unless they give up. So in this world, there's all sorts of, imperfect goals people have. They want to be bodybuilding, they want to be beautiful, they want to be this. Okay, you want to do those things, that's okay. But the ideal of true perfection is that a person refines his attitude toward life, his attitude toward others, his actions, his deeds, his thoughts, his feelings. He refines them so that they should be productive, in tune with the truth. If a person really is interested in doing this, then any little imperfection that appears in himself, he wants it to be revealed. He wants to know everything that's wrong so he can fix it up, if he's interested in truth. And that's what happens. That's this whole idea of the Negaim. That's the whole idea of this spiritual leprosy. It's a sign that in spiritual, ba'avodat Hashem, the service of God, that he is fixed up in everything. He's fixed up everything he has to fix up. He's done the ultimate that he can. He's removed any sort of bad, which is selfishness, from his body, from his soul. But there still is a little bit of waste products in the end of his garments that he didn't really refine yet. Therefore, he's in his only, therefore, only in his flesh, the outer part of his being, there's revealed a little bit of discoloration. So here now what we're saying is, in the Torah, Rashi explains that one of the reasons for Tzoraat is because the person spoke Lashon Hora. He spoke, slander or destructive speech to somebody. So it's a punishment for his bad that he did. But here the Rebbe is saying that's one reason. That's one reason. But there's also another reason, is that it's revealing, it's because of his good. He's so good, the person is so good, and he wants to strive for ultimate good, get rid of any bad that there is, as therefore God does him a big favor, and he reveals this little bit of bad that he would never, like a kosher, he reveals something that person would have never thought on his own. But it's revealed only in the external of this person's being, on his skin. Or we can say, we can add on, like it says, Adam is like a pure, ki yeb or basaro, if there is in the skin of his flesh, lenegat Tzoraat, the plague, the impurity of Tzoraat. Why is it or basaro? What does it mean in the flesh, in the skin of his flesh? Shelo zu bilvad she'eno, that it is not shayach lo la'atzmo. It's not relevant to his inner organs or to the person's soul or of a person or his even the sinews, but it's not even relevant to his flesh, his muscles, his gidim of a person, anything that's below the surface. Davar hamishtaneh v'nosaf lo al yedei achila, a thing which can be changed by means of eating or drinking, something that he does from his inside. The impurity is only found in the most external parts of his being on his skin, which surrounds all of his flesh, all of his the meat and his organs, but orbisoro, the external of his muscles, so to speak, on the skin. Adam kiyeb ba'orbisoro. So it says an Adam, a perfect person, when there is on his skin the most external parts of him. Hainu she'ein zedavar regil. It's not a normal thing. Ela mikre. It's just a thing which is very, very unusual. Hayotze migeru regil. It goes out of nature. That God will help a person to this degree that He shows him even the most minute, imperceptible imperfections that he's got. This gam az, that even then it's only, even then, even though it's most the external, right? How do you say the insignificant things in his personality, but nevertheless it's considered to be an imperfection, a nega tzoraat. Nega from the angle of the negia, it touches him. This thing which is unusual, in other words, he has a little tiny bit of egotism, whatever. It's not relevant to anything on his external. Elarak nogea bo. It just touches nega tzoraat. It just touches him on the outside. An interesting story, I'll tell you, the interesting story, a really bizarre story, but I'll tell you the story. It's written in the Talmud. The Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, we talked about his holiness, was incomparable. Well, he had a son, was Rabbi Elazar ben Shimon. And his son was, in fact, no less holier than Rabbi Shimon was, a tremendously holy person. So here's the proof. So it says that he died. Rabbi Shimon's son died. But he told his wife before he died not to bury him publicly. Don't take it for a funeral, because he had a lot of enemies. Why, it's not important, but he had a lot of enemies. And he didn't want him to know that he was dead. First of all, they would rejoice, and then they would also, maybe they would defile his grave. Anyway, because before he had been a policeman and he put people in jail. It's a long, very interesting, amazing story about his life. So if that's amazing, listen to this. So his wife, he said, well, his wife said, what should I do? So he's told his wife, put me up in the attic and leave the door open. And when people come, after I'm dead, and people will come and they'll ask questions. They used to ask him questions because he was a tremendously genius person. And you yell up the question and I'll yell down the answer. He was dead. The man was dead. And this went on for 20 years. 20 years, he was dead. His body did not rot, of course. His 20 years, he was up in the attic, and he yelled down answers. His wife yelled up answers. He yelled down answers. But 20 years, he was dead. Oh, no, this is the point that I'm trying to say. Finally, in the end, so it says after 20 years, she went up to see, what's going on, maybe to clean off or dust off his body or something. I don't know what she did. Anyway, so she saw a little worm come out of his ear. And she understood that she had to bury him. She had to bury him. If he didn't rot, so, then it didn't smell, nobody would know that he was there. But whatever it is, she knew that it was a time that his enemies wouldn't making trouble for him. And she announced that he was dead, and she buried him. Sure enough, there was no problem. So I said, why did the worm come out of his ear? So because one, he never had any, any imperfections in his whole being. There was no imperfections whatsoever. But why did he have this worm? Because once he heard someone say something bad about a Talmid Chacham. This is the level of purity that he was striving for, that he had achieved. He heard someone say something bad about a Torah scholar, and he didn't reprove that person. Because he heard him say something, so therefore that was his punishment. There was a little imperfection, a tiny imperfection in his books, which revealed after 20 years, I was dead for 20 years, it revealed a little worm. So it shows that people who strive for perfection, that the littlest, smallest thing can be considered, they're considered to be an imperfection. Okay, I know. It's not relevant to external ella rak nogiabo. Okay. But and even more, but Ikar, and the main thing is Kafi Shemosa B'Lakuti Torah, like it says in the Lakuti Torah. Also, these Nagoyim, we're not learning this week. Also, this Tzoraat, these Nagoyim, they are very, very high. It's not called Tameh until a Kohen, we said the priest comes and declares that he's impure. Shadayin lo kora lo shem Tameh, and in Nagoyim called Tuma. If a person has all the discolorations, and the person, that's the law, very strange law. A person is a tremendous Torah scholar, and he knows all the laws, and he sees he's got a discoloration of Tzoraat on his arm, on his leg, wherever he's got, and that's it. He knows that he's impure. He knows he's impure. He's not impure. Not impure. No. What do you have to do? You have to immediately call a Kohen, and they bring a Kohen, and the Kohen has to look at it and say that he's impure. What if they bring a Kohen, and the Kohen is an ignoramus? He's an ignoramus. He can't learn. So what do? The Kohen says, I don't know. 1 second. That's your arm, or is that your leg? What is it? Oh man, we got a real case over here. Are you sure you're a Kohen? Yeah, sure. I'm a Kohen. My father's a Kohen. I get a little confused sometimes. Okay, so he says, listen, I'll tell you what to say, and you say it. You say, listen, here's the law, right? The law is that if it's all white and there's a hair growing in the middle of it, is that it's impure, right? So this is all white, correct? Yes. And it's got a hair growing in the middle? Yes. So you have to say, this is a nega tzorat and is impure. Repeat after me. This is nega tzorat, then he becomes impure. But before that, before the Kohen puts these words out of his mouth, it's not an impurity, but exactly the opposite. This is a tremendously high light. It's very, very, what's called severe judgments of holiness. What's it like? What is it like? A lot of times it happens, I get ready for Shabbat and I put a garment on. In Chabad we wear these black, like a sort of a long suit jacket. So I put on that suit jacket and I go out. It's a new one, that I just bought recently, clean. I'll go outside. In my house, it's a little bit dark. So I go and I'm, walking to synagogue, and it's still light outside the synagogue. Suddenly I look down and I realize, wow, when you get out in the light, I put on the wrong jacket. And this one's all dirty. It's all, I wanted to give this one to the cleaners, and this is the one I didn't. But when I was in the house, it looked great. It looked okay. When you get into the light, all of a sudden things become more, you can become more judgmental. There's the same thing over here. The Tzoraat really comes from a tremendously high light. God turns the lights on, so to speak. It's very, very high. And this is what's called very severe judgments of holiness. And so really that comes down, it's a good thing. Light is a great thing. But it reveals any smallest imperfections that there can possibly be. But Yesh Lomer, we can say, that these two aspects we saw, that the Negayim, that this spiritual leprosy, that we said that it was only just the leftovers and the ends of his garments, right? Just on the external of his skin, that he has not purified. And also that is tremendously high things, right? Tremendously high lights. Once again, on one side, we're saying that this is imperfections. Now we're saying it's the highest level of perfection of lights of godliness, that they depend one on the other. Even since that these Negayim, since that the spiritual leprosy, it really comes from very high things, very high lights of godliness, locally, and therefore when it comes down, a negative thing by means of external forces, harizeh, rak inyan, chitzoni shebenoga. This is only the most external levels of the physical world. Negia bilbad, and this is called negia, it just touches him. Nega, the word shenogea, the nega, the word nega means an impurity, but the word nega also means just to touch. On the lowest levels of his being. Therefore, gam, the tikkun, how do you fix this up? How is it? Not by means of a new thing, but just you have to reveal the truth of what these are, that they're really truly high lights. that the fact that this bad has been revealed is coming from a tremendously high level of godliness. Like it says, Zot tiyet Torata Matzura biyom Torato. Like we learn next week, it says this is the second Torah portion. This is the law of the impure person when he becomes pure. Torato is impurity. This is by means of Yom, the day that he becomes impure, the day that he becomes pure. The day becomes She'inyanehu, or the day is revelation. Like it says, V'yikra Elokim or Yom, like it says, God called to the day, that they called light, he called day. Day and light. It says that before God created the world, there was day and night. And day and night. God made the sun and the moon so that we would know when day was shining and when night was shining. Hayom, these are two spiritual levels, day and night. But God made the sun and the sky, that the sun would shine and would not shine, so we would know when daytime is shining and when nighttime is shining. Haynu Gilei Oros, these are tremendously high lights of the Negoyim of these plagues of these impurities. And by means of this, Yanikas Chitzonium Ad Lahepech Torah Afilu Bechitzonis Bilavad. And by means of this, you can refine it, become impure. Okay, so here's where my metaphor breaks down, right? So I go outside with my Shabbos garment, and now when the lights are shining, all of a sudden I can see the impurities, the dirt which is on my garment. And even if it's not really so dirty, even if it's just, a couple of little specks over here, but still it's dirty. It's still dirty. So I can see what the imperfections. But here, my analogy breaks down, because what's the Rebbe saying? The cure for these impurities is exactly this high light that reveals them. By means of this negates the external forces, the bad, until they transform the hepech tahora afilu b'chitzonis bilvad, that there's nothing negative left at all. Transforms it. How is this going to be? How is it that the same light that reveals this tremendously high light, awareness of God, that reveals my faults, that's going to be the same force which is going to do away with my faults, clean them? We're going to find this out and much more tomorrow. Now let's do the Yom Yom. By the way, after the class, we'll finish the class. You can ask questions if you want. Anybody wants to. You don't have to ask questions.